TVF actually changed my life, the viral fever. Finance plays a very, very, very important role. Simply the reason being, if you haven't planned that, a lot of the startups, they take a hit. They fall flat on their face. But I think you'll graduate from an Excel sheet to a lot of these tools, which is actually available right now. Namita Thapar had actually partnered with them and she kind of introduced this concept into India. And she introduced it across multiple metros. When I initially started, I was an amateur novice and I did not know in this particular finance space. And that's where advisors actually played a very, very important role because I actually lost a lot of money. I learned it the hard way. After seeking advisory from these experts, I was able to kind of save and, block that bleeding part of it.
Greetings everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, House of Equentis. This is Chandan Parla, and in this episode, we have Umeysh Ramalingachar. Umesh, welcome to the podcast, buddy.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure hosting you.
Lovely, likewise.
While the time I was doing my research about your specific profile, trust me, I was flabbergasted, left, right, and center. Okay. Someone who is into everything that I personally love. Mm-hmm. Someone who's been a vice president for brand at TVF. TVF is by far the best internet content creators / short film producers in the country. Hands down, no doubt about that. And in the tech space, someone who has been out there in the market for the fifth mode of transport is Elon Musk. And his product Hyperloop is where you are a part of again. Other than that, you are in the consulting space and you have been the founder of this company called Spicy Rocket.
Spicy Rocket.
I want to know so many spicy things about it.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
So just to kind of quickly touch upon the point, TVF actually changed my life, the viral fever. And while I was the VP of brands, while I was busy bringing on, brands on board to actually have a brand integration and be a part of the script. It was fascinating, simply the reason being, the brands are very interested to kind of share the story, how the partnership would be. So that's what actually changed my life with TVF. And Hyperloop, which actually happened about, again, a couple of years back, I was fortunate enough that I got to work with brilliant minds who were part of the BITS Pilani college. And, while there were a lot of colleges which were invited, BITS Pilani boys were the only ones who got shortlisted for working on this particular idea. And I was fortunate to be a part of it, simply the reason being the whole project was actually shot and done in, built in Bangalore.
That's crazy. And I personally think Bangalore needs Hyperloop.
Very much.
We anyway time travel, because in Silkboard, you have to travel through time for 3 hours to travel a kilometer. Anyway, I want to get into the professional part of it. Especially, your experience in the space of consulting is not just being it in the Indian subdivision. You were at the international space for the past 7 years, correct? So we will get into that. But before we get started, I want to understand, how did your journey start and where are we today? In a very brief way.
Okay, so let me quickly give you a background. So I have been in the startup ecosystem for a little more than a decade right now. And what actually happened was I've been wearing multiple hats, predominantly to a large extent of my career, it's been sales and strategic partnerships and a bit of crowdfunding. And that's where I got the opportunity to kind of be with work with Hyperloop. Exactly.
Correct.
So before that, I was actually in the corporate sector. I used to be working with companies like Accenture and Akamai, and I was again wearing the sales hat over there. So why I decided to kind of take a plunge into the startup ecosystem was, for me, I felt I had reached a very monotonous or a mundane point in the corporate sector, and I think startups would have probably gotten me more exposure, wearing multiple hats, trying different things, trying out different hands and hats, and I got to wear multiple hats, be it from hiring a sales team or probably to being the VP of brands. So all these kind of roles made me learn, and I felt, and I keep saying this always, that none of the B schools were able to kind of teach or probably give you the exposure which I could probably get it through the startup ecosystem.
100%.
And while I was working, I also thought I should probably share this kind of a knowledge and experience with a lot of the young startups and the entrepreneurs. And by being associated with NASSCOM 10,000 startups, with T-Hub and all these incubators, accelerators, I thought it could be a best way to kind of associate myself as a mentor, as a go-to-market.
And you're everywhere. You're
Not
everywhere.
everywhere. No, I cannot be everywhere, but yeah, but at least few selected places. But I tried my hands at it, and that's where I built my. In return, that's where I got to build my network, and I'm very active, super active on LinkedIn, and not only just that, offline events, any interesting networking events. I'm
We will
there.
talk about the being the OG at networking later.
Yep. But
So one of the patterns that I've seen is throughout your journey, we've seen this one part that is you are a growth focused venture person. Correct. So what do you mean that, and what does it mean to you? Like, how do you do that for businesses?
So my own personal journey or story has been that when I was part of the core team of any of these startups, growth is a very, very important thing, because obviously when you're talking to investors, they would obviously ask you questions in terms of what's your growth trajectory, how do you scale your business and things like that, because they would be investing money into your startup, and how do you basically utilize the funds. So for that, the whole growth part of it, or the patterns, is something which I had to kind of spend a lot of time learning. And as I've been a sales guy, obviously at the end of the day, every month you have targets to be achieved.
100%.
And because my salary used to be associated with that, because while you have the fixed component, there is a variable component, and your variable component gets paid only because you achieve your targets.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of learned this whole growth and the scale part of it. And I thought, while I used it on a day-to-day basis, I also thought I should probably offer this to some of the young startups. And this is actually many years back, where I came across a lot of startup founders, because they used to reach out to me looking at my LinkedIn profile, trying to say, I need this connect, can you please get me connected to all these persons, asking for references and connects. But then I thought I should probably offer this as a service, could be or as a paid or a pro bono.
That's where the consulting started.
That's what the consulting is. Absolutely.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And throughout this point of building businesses, where do you see finance as a part of it?
So, see, as I told you, utilization of the funds. Because one is once they have raised funds, there'll be money sitting in their bank account. How do they utilize it? So you'll have to kind of put the entire utilization part of it. What are the aspects? You'll have to break it down. How much of it is for marketing, hiring, building the technology, or probably it could be miscellaneous expenses like your rentals and miscellaneous expenses. All of that has to be factored in. So that's where finance plays a very, very, very important role. Simply the reason being, if you haven't planned that, lot of the startups, they take a hit. They fall flat on their face, because if your finances are not factored in for all these aspects, then I think you have a very good. So that's where either you consult with from people who have experience, or probably have a very good CA, chartered accountant, or probably ex-CFO who could be like an advisor, or person to you who can actually advise and give you some tips. How do you basically manage your finances?
So there's a saying, right? You build your business on an Excel sheet before you build it in real life. So do you second that?
Absolutely. Excel sheet has to be from day one, because without which I don't think nothing is going to be actually happening, and that will continue to kind of you will actually have it for a long time. But I think you will graduate from an Excel sheet to tools, finance tools, and managing your finances and all of that. Will be using a lot of these tools which is actually available right now, fintechs, apps, and things like that.
Got it. So that's interesting. This is the business part of it. I want to get into the personal finance part of it very quick. But before that, something that really struck my head like 5 minutes ago, I really want to talk about that. That is, while I was going through profile, it said Hyperloop. And you also mentioned to me that there were many people who wanted to build that, but there were a selected set of few. So, and also I remember this was crowdfunded.
Yep.
Run us through it.
So when I met the team, the Bits Pilani team, a bunch of about close to 10 members, they're all very focused, like really the fire in the belly, very hungry to kind of make it for themselves, be in the fame game and all that. So what I realized was, while they are, eager to kind of learn, they were also very, very, technologically really very sound and solid. And what I realized was the kind of research and the amount of knowledge that they've gained when they took up this particular topic or as a project, it was fascinating. And that's where I decided to kind of join hands, because for me, there is also a lot of learning. And I, wanted to kind of, learn as much as possible, because I don't know if I will ever get to visit the SpaceX facility, but at least by being associated with these guys, I thought at least the exposure, the learning.
Did Elon get on a Zoom call and was like, hi?
No, not that. It didn't actually happen, but I think they were fortunate enough, but after building the pod, which was built in Bangalore, and they kind of airlifted it to California to the SpaceX facility. But I think some of the boys actually, they got to kind of meet the team and a couple of them. I think they did briefly get to click a picture and, have a few minutes of conversation with Elon Musk. But being associated with such a team, vibrant team, was like a big thing for me.
So there's a team part of it.
Yeah.
And where does crowdfunding come into the picture?
So what actually happened was, once they kind of put the project, again, it's going back to the same. They had put an Excel trying to say, this is how much it's going to be costing in terms of trying to build the technology for the pod, for the production, manufacturing, and all of that. And then they realized that the number is actually like a huge number.
Isn't Elon too rich to sponsor it all?
Yeah, but this is actually a crowdfunding project which is actually shared across, across the top colleges. So this is one of the college, and they realized that they were actually short on funds, and that's where they realized, somebody who comes with a crowdfunding specialist they want to kind of be associated with. And I decided to kind of jump and join the bandwagon, and I helped them with crowdfunding. How did I do that? By trying to reach out to my network and a lot of the partners who were interested in sponsoring. It could be like an individual who wants to kind of sponsor a X number of lakhs, or probably some companies who are very interested in, because they have the CSR budget, and in that, for any interesting initiatives projects, they would want to be probably part of it by trying to park some funds. And in return, by putting in so much of money, in return they would actually get their logo to be a part of the Hyperloop pod. So they get to kind of put that's a brand partnership or a sponsorship.
I think associating and plugging in brands has been your forte.
Yep.
That's where let's say Hyperloop has been there, and that's where TVF comes in, and that's where something interesting comes in. So throughout this all, something that I see is you're very passionate at teaching. You really love oration, right? You are out there in the market. Now, this point is where I want to understand. You also had a phase of being a teacher era.
Yeah.
And are you still a professor?
I'm not. No. I'm right now. I'm a guest lecturer as a visiting faculty with some of the universities. I'm an ex-Christite, so I get invited by Christ as well occasionally. But I visited a couple of other universities like Alliance and all that. So how the whole teaching aspect actually happened was, I happened to kind of be there at one of the events. As I told you, I attend a lot of networking.
So this is Thapar, if I remember.
Thapar. Much before Thapar, it used to be called as the Young Entrepreneurs Academy.
Okay.
And
was it a startup-driven school?
It was actually a startup entrepreneurship-driven school from US. But Namita Thapar had actually she partnered with them, and she kind of introduced this concept into India. And she introduced it across multiple metros, like Pune.
Namita
Thapar from Shark Tank India. Yes, yeah. I was fortunate enough to kind of work with her.
That's great.
So I was her faculty for Bangalore.
What are you teaching?
All about entrepreneurship, about how do you basically start up, what does it take to be wearing a hat as a startup founder, and for these young kids who are between the age group of 13 to 18, it was absolutely very, very interesting, and again great to kind of work with them, because they're such brilliant minds. You teach them anything and they would have they just grasp it, they get it like that, and they would have done their groundwork so well, and they would have worked on the presentation, the Excel sheet, and they come with a lot of inquisitive questions trying to say, sir, I have this particular doubt, how to basically raise funds. Do you think will I be able to kind of be in front of a VC to kind of raise funds? Very interesting, cute questions. But again, getting it from such young minds was like fascinating. And even more fascinating part was to kind of work with them, handhold them, and teach them, guide them was like a big thing.
See, you are helping a lot of folks to build their own startups, and I'm sure it all comes from an experience of your startup grind.
Yeah.
And startup grind is something that you've built as a company.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of put it in right, Startup Grind is a global, they have multiple chapters. So I'm the Bangalore chapter director for Startup Grind.
So it's a community to do what?
It's a community for, startup entrepreneurs who are from different walks of life. We host events, networking events, and basically I invite, funded startups founders, basically come and start and talk their journey. How did they start up? What did it take them? What are all the skill sets that one needs to actually have of running a successful startup? Also, not just successful startup. It could be even failed startups as well, because that in itself is like a big learning. What are the things, or probably subtle things not a successful founder will have to keep in mind and share that experience. Because again, as I told you, right, none of the B schools or any other schools can actually teach you this. It's more of a hands-on experience, and this actually will be like a handbook which can be experiences which the founders can actually share it. And I was trying to host a lot of events and doing a lot of online Zoom meetings and invite the founders to kind of basically ask their questions, doubts, and things like that.
Got it. Very interesting. And something that I also heard from a lot of folks is that while I was going through your profile, I while I was asking a few folks about you, they mentioned to me that you are everywhere in Bangalore. Like, you are that networker.
I hope for all the right reasons.
100% there for the right reasons. And they mentioned to me that networking is something that you're very second with. So what do you being an OG guy in the networking space, what do you look at it?
So initially when I started, so I've been networking probably for a little more than 8 or 9 years right now, and I would have attended probably to a lot of the events from NASCOM Product Conclave to Your Story events. And since you get into that kind of community or the circuit or the circle of people, right? So whenever there is an interesting event actually happen, because my contact details would be there, and I would get the invite, and I would make it a point to kind of attend most of these events. Simply the reason being, you get to kind of not only just network, but also learn. You get to meet some really amazing, fascinating people, simply the reason being, with the kind of experience or the expertise that they bring to the table. That is something which is a great learning for me. And you continue to kind of be in touch with them, not only just to kind of, exchange of ideas, but I think the way they have built their organization or the empire, you will kind of get to touch upon it. Because once you kind of connect with them and kind of network, you come home and probably read up about them, get an understanding as to what is their LinkedIn profile, what is the kind of background that they come from. And next time when you meet them, probably at another event, or probably set up some time and,
give feedback or discuss
give
see
feedback.
The ways of synergy.
Yeah, not giving feedback, because probably these are all seasoned veteran guys. And, get a lot of, inputs and insights for me to learn and kind of improve. And, that could be like a value addition for myself professionally and personally.
Absolutely. You know what? Like, we are talking about a lot of startups. There are a lot of startups here in Bangalore or overall in India. But if you look at if you zoom out and see the bigger picture of the country, we are at X level. And sure, India's startup story or India's growth story is being written right now as we speak.
Absolutely.
For the next 10 years, or let's say for the next 100 years, for this century, it's going to be India's growth game. That's where I wanted to understand, where do you think, in terms of the growth aspect, in terms of the finance aspect, what should be the changes, and where do we stand, and how do we scale it?
So I think India is at a phenomenally very, very good position. It's exploding, and it will kind of continue to grow. Simply the reason being, the economy is also at a very good position, and especially the startup scenario is very good. And I think I'll also tell you, I'm sure you're also aware of it. Some of the most famous or the unicorns which are born or are from Bangalore. Simply the reason being, it's not just the startup ecosystem; it's also a lot of other factors, right? I mean, as you get that kind of good talent, the climate is also big plus point for people to kind of come and set up their shop out here, and for them to kind of be successful. So that's where all these unicorns are born from Bangalore itself. And once these guys raise funds, they will have to actually look at scaling. So they immediately look at how do they basically, once they've raised funds, how do they look at global expansion? So from Bangalore for the world. So that is what they've built, and that's what they are become famous for. And they think, given this kind of a track record which has actually happened in the past, that's where most of the guys from different parts of India, they look at moving to Bangalore because of all these supporting factors. And once you actually have that, they could be more unicorns or probably successful companies being born out of here. Because I was very fortunate again to be working with, or having worked with, Namita Thapar, the founder of InMobi and Glance. I had a very short stint, but that was fantastic. A lot of learning, great guy. Even though he's so big in terms of his experience and knowledge, very simple, grounded, down-to-earth guy. So like this I've had, of course, I used to report directly to Arnab Kumar, who was the founder of
Glance is
TVF.
again advertising, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere you're in the content and advertising space.
That's been, fortunately or unfortunately, has come very close to me, and I've had some really great stints in the...
coming from a point where TVF is currently one media house which is building content which the country is proud of.
Absolutely.
Because of the originality and because of everything that I don't need to explain at all.
Yeah.
For a company like that, revenue is probably one of the most important aspects of it. And that happened majorly by sponsorships in an explicit and a not so explicit ways. And in a not so explicit ways, the product plugins came in. While there are a pool of brands out there, how did you know that you want to go for A, B, C, D companies? For example, something that I remember of our conversation was that you brought in the brands like OnePlus, Zoomcar, and what is the other big name? Ola.
Yes. So I'll tell you. So what actually happens was it's a slightly different treatment or a thought process. So they write a script. Before the script is actually being written, they keep in mind, hey, this particular script or the story is for a brand like Zoomcar. Or probably one for OnePlus. So OnePlus was for humorously yours, and Zoomcar was for tripling. And all these big content stories, right? So they would probably keep in mind this is where the subtle brand integration is going to be there for Zoomcar. I would like to bring. So when they give me that heads up, trying to say, why don't you kind of go and pitch this to Zoomcar and try and say, we're working on something really, very exciting. Would you guys want to be a part of it? And they'll jump in and say, yes, we are certainly interested. Now, once they've come on board halfway through, the rest is going to be the numbers monies which we need to sit and negotiate and all that. But for all you know, 90% they'll be sold because something from TVF, they will never say no.
Of course.
Okay. So that was the first bit of it with Zoomcar and OnePlus and Ola also. So what actually happened was, while the script is being ready, as I told you, once I get a go ahead from these guys, then we probably talk about where are all the brand positions in
slots
which slots where exactly it's going to be happening. Once we give them a idea of this is how the flow is going to be, they'll be all excited. All they'll be waiting for is once the web series is finally out and the whole pre-prod everything is done, and then they'll be waiting to watch.
Can I sum it up in this way? While the other houses are looking to plug in a brand, TVF is making a show before even the brand is plugged in.
Yep.
Around the brand.
Yes, absolutely. Around the brand. Exactly. Very rightly said.
That's insane, man. So in this forefront, something that I also see that is mentorship part. You were very active in the mentorship space. Go deep in that.
So, in the past, as I had mentioned, I've been very fortunate to kind of be associated with, NASSCOM 10,000 startups or T-Hub and Kerala Startup Mission. But T-Hub is something which I'm very actively involved with right now as a growth mentor and advisor, because there are a bunch of startups, who are actually actively looking at trying to aggressively on a growth phase. Correct. And as a go-to-market with the network or the connections and the experience and the expertise that I come with, I think that is something which they see as a value add. And that I think most of the startups actually need, and I do it on a consulting or on a one-on-one basis, working with them very closely with the founders, trying to understand as to what has been their journey so far, where are they going wrong, or what kind of areas, if they need any correction which needs to be done. I probably work with them very closely, try to give them probably a perspective as to how they can look at it in terms of it'll help them scale and grow.
That's interesting. I wanna go deeper into the growth tangent of it. You mentioned about making a product in India, but not for India, but for the world outside. Correct? So going global is a way that has always been the propagation for any businessman. For example, an import and export company always want to go for the external game, but not a transporting company inside India. Sure, you can make money, but you can make a lot in the international game. Similarly, building products for the world outside needs a lot of insights. So what do you think are 2-3 insights are needed for someone who's building a product in India for the world?
Okay. So I'd like to answer it in two parts. So for the first part is, once your a product is being built, or probably you have an idea that you want to kind of address it to the India market, you have to try and see how you can actually crack the India market. Unless you don't get about a larger market share, that means you haven't done the India market. So you can't leave your home ground and probably go elsewhere. If you have a fairly larger share of the market which you've gotten by your product has spoken for itself, and you have a lot of customers, repeat businesses and all that, then you are at a point where you are ready to kind of take up the global market. And once you kind of go to the global market, before you go to the global market, you will have to start building your network, start talking to a lot of people. And that's where, with my global connections or the network that I have, I'll be able to kind of say, hey, this particular product in the logistics space or in the fintech space, they're looking at exploring the Europe market. And I reach out to some people whom I would have worked with in the past. These are all subject matter experts, and they'll be able to kind of set up some time with these startups and kind of talk to them and give them a perspective. Because first is going to be like a very consultative or a approach of trying to understand, why do you want to get into the Europe market? What do you what's in it for you, and things like that. If the startup founders have done the ground research and the market research that they want to kind of enter the market, because there is a huge potential or the missing gap, then these guys, they help them and they kind of handhold and work with them. And for all they can also become one of the local. Even if it is an Indian, but he might have settled in Europe for many years, he can actually become like the local director who can be like on the board of directors on the growth side.
So, let's say if there is a 35-year-old investor who's watching this podcast, what do you think are the actionable steps for their, let's say, clothing business that they're doing right now in India? Let's say Bombay. How do you think they can break into a bigger market? Give me in 3 actionable steps.
So one is, I'm sure, if he's a young investor, I'm sure he's done his groundwork and he probably would be very well aware of the whole market, because one is keeping the market dynamics and the pulse of the market. So in 3 steps, if I have to say, as I told you, doing the market research, thorough research, by talking to a lot of people, understanding, getting the pulse of the market. First thing is that. Second thing is, he has to kind of try various methods or various strategies by trying to give out a lot of offers, or probably, what do you say? I don't know, how do I put it? Like, basically, one is giving offers, or probably having something like, it should be very, very incentivized kind of a thing.
You mean a funnel opener for which people come and then convert later?
Absolutely. Okay. Something like that could be probably, he can look at it. He should try that. Third thing would be talking to more investors from the network. That will actually give him perspective as to whether if he's doing the right thing for his startup, or probably he'll be able to kind of get a perspective which he would have missed out on.
Understood. We spoke a lot about business. I want to know about your personal life. So when I say about your personal life, you're doing so many things and you have done a lot, correct? Where do you have time? How do you manage your time between like personal and professional lives? How do you spend time with your family?
So one doesn't have time. You always need to make time. So one is, I make it a point to kind of regularly keep my evenings for a workout. Either I go for a jog, or probably playing games like table tennis and badminton or something. So I kind of, change as per my schedule and days. But otherwise, I make it a point to kind of regularly spend time 1.5 hour for my run. So that is kept aside in the evenings. And weekends, I play table tennis with my son, which is like a regular thing. So that's what I keep myself active with.
That's on the personal life. Yeah. And what's your mantra to keep it all going, the personal and professional life?
So I believe in trying to, do good, help as many people as possible. And I've done that in the past and I continue to do it. I think that's all, good karma, but never expect anything in return. So just do it and forget about it. So I think if it has to come to you, it'll come back to you in some shape or form, if it has to. But yeah, with zero expectations.
See, to build everything, you need a great team to be out there, correct? Because at the end of the day, delegation is the way to grow.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you ensure that you build, and what do you look for in a great team?
So one is, having the same wavelength or like-mindedness, the same wavelength and frequency is very, very important, because until and unless you don't find a person who is able to kind of, understand, where you come from, what is the, mindset, my vision and mission and vision, I think then at the first place there is a disconnect. If you find somebody whom you obviously it's like, you're going on a date, and when you're going on a date, you got to understand what is the kind of a, wavelength or, mindset each the other person comes from. Yeah. And if you're able to kind of really connect, that spark you get
is when you go on a second date.
Yes, exactly. And that continues.
Got it. Do you watch a lot of podcasts or read books?
Of course, yeah. I've been, doing it at least for the last, a little more than a year or so right now. Because after I did my own podcast, what I realized was I think I need to listen to more podcasts for me to kind of there should be a lot of takeaways, insights and all that. So which I've been doing it, which I continue to do it also right now.
Got it.
And my podcast was Nama Podcast, which is on there, available on Spotify and all the leading streaming platforms.
Correct.
It was about interviewing entrepreneurs. Now I'm thinking of trying to do it slightly different, with a different, mindset and all of that. So that work in
What
progress.
podcasts do you look up to? Matlab, where do you get this information from?
So I look up to...
And also books.
Yeah. So a lot of podcasts would be predominantly by successful entrepreneurs who've kind of made it and, they have become successful entrepreneurs who become investors, or probably they've taken up to podcasting as their full-time thing. And, how does it actually... What is the appealing thing? Why they changed their profession from what they were? While they might be having a gig going on, their own startup, but at the same time they seriously dedicate time. I feel they're being so disciplined, or probably having like a very structured approach that X number of hours for their work for their startup and X number of hours for the podcast. I think that way there are quite a lot of podcasts which I've been listening to. One is the Joe Rogan is something which I've listened to regularly, and A16 Z, which is something which I've been listening to. So all these are podcasts which I would highly recommend to a lot of listeners as well.
Let's look at an alternative world. If you weren't a growth advisor, what would you be doing?
Good question. I think I probably studied C, C++. I would have been a techie, coding and all that. But I don't know. Somehow, for what I studied from what I'm doing right now is completely different worlds.
So were you an engineer?
No, I mean, I never go. I could have probably chosen that path, but I did not. But I ended up, going down the sales, path, and ended up choosing sales as my first thing.
You've done so much over the years, and then you were in the international space for the last 7 years or so. More than 7 years, correct? And then you're looking at businesses in India, businesses internationally, companies of all sorts. Let's say media, transportation, and then consulting. So throughout this point, as a founder, as a key stakeholder in various companies and positions, how did you manage your finances? So how did it all happen?
So what actually happened was I realized there used to be a lot of inflow of money. Once you have your income, you would want to probably be very, very careful and wary of how do you utilize the funds. How do you? So I started parking my funds into a lot of investments. It could be share trading. Opened up a demat account and did a little bit of trading and all that. And then I realized if you do not have that kind of time to kind of basically manage your finances, at least park it in a place where it's going to be safe. So then I ventured into mutual funds and investing into a couple of insurance policies and stuff like that. So that's what I did. And then what I got to know through meeting a friend of mine, I think going back to the whole now, because Zerodha is the talk of the town with the stock trading platform. So that is something which I'm actively gotten myself into, and that is what is kind of helping me secure my funds and probably look at having some.
And throughout this point, do you do your own research or do you work with advisors?
No, I do my own research, but when in doubt, that's when I reach out to advisors.
Mm-hmm. And do you think advisors are an important aspect?
Absolutely, they play a very, very important role, because I think it's one is the experience and the expertise that they bring to the table, but I think the market dynamics are very, very, volatile.
Yeah.
I think keeping that in mind, that is where advisors actually play a very, very key important role.
Mm-hmm. And one important thing that I see is everyone's risk appetite is completely different, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you might be able to take like a 30% risk, or let's say 50% risk. The amount of hit that you'll be able to take has to be custom built only according to your financial profile. And I think advisors do a great job at that.
Absolutely. On that note, I want to kind of tell you, when I initially started, I was an, amateur novice, and I did not know much in this particular finance space. And that's where advisors actually played a very, very important role, because I actually lost a lot of money.
Okay.
And then I learned it the hard way. But I think, after seeking advisory from these experts, that is what actually added I was able to kind of save and, block that bleeding part of it.
Got it. Very interesting. Okay, let's switch into a very fun round of it. We call that the rapid fire.
Okay.
So to get started with, how does your Monday look like? in one word.
Sometimes Mondays are usually like the Mondays blues, but I think now I've gotten used to it. I think I've become a little bit more disciplined because you plan your weekend in such a way that you get prepared and you look forward to the Monday. Because once you start the Monday, it goes on for the rest of the week. So if you have a good Monday, I think it goes on. The rest of the week looks good. You start with a bad note or probably on the wrong foot, then I think it'll take you would have probably lost a day or two, and then you'll kind of settle in and start on a Tuesday or Wednesday.
Interesting. And are you someone who is into investing, or are you someone into saving?
I think I'm more, again, it's based on experience. I used to be investing mode, but right now I've gotten into the saving mode. So right now my answer is saving.
Okay. So thinking about the fact that you've been traveling a lot nationally and internationally across various states in India and various countries internationally. What's your favorite cuisine?
Sushi.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. And are you a coffee person or a tea person?
I'm more of a hardcore tea person.
Huh.
Chai pe charcha, as Modi says, chai. So something very, very dear to me.
Is there any TV show that you're watching currently that's helping you not just to relax, but also to learn something out of it?
I've watched a lot of documentaries. Of course, Shark Tank India and US is something which I religiously follow. And I think in terms of the founders' mindset and they kind of go through for, being there, it's not a joke. Because you have to put yourself in the founder's shoe.
Yeah.
And, asking those kind of really blunt, hard-hitting questions is something, it's a good learning. It's a great learning for me.
So you mentioned that you watch a lot of documentaries as well. So what are one or two documentaries that you love, all-time favorites?
Jonathan Harris and Vice Media is something which I keep regularly.
Johnny is like a huge guy. And Vice is, of course, I think they're very famous for their stories.
Docu-series, yes.
Yeah. But it was fun, man. I really had a very globalized approach of this conversation. It was about a lot of things. It was about everything. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Umeysh. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Chandran. It's a pleasure. Absolutely. I loved it.
Thank you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a conversation with Umeysh. In this episode, there was a lot that we discussed about. And if you found value, share it with those folks who you think will find value too. And at the end of the day, for more such conversations, follow us, subscribe, and see you in the next one. Bye.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.